now being 5:45, I'll call the Finance Audit Committee meeting to order. And I'll read the accessibility statement first. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Microphones or telephones will be used by all speakers. Large print materials are available upon request. If you'd like either of these accommodations, please contact Mary Waldron. The Notice of Non-Discrimination Rights and Protections to Beneficiaries regarding the Title VI Non-Discrimination Protections and the State Non-Discrimination Protections is available on the Old Colony Planning Council website. All right, so Mary, how about roll call to get us moving?
Yes, Christine Joy.
Present.
Sandra Wright.
Present.
Becky Coletta.
Present.
Alex Haggerty. We get your thumbs up, Alex.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the item on the
What
agenda.
is wrong with my boy there? Come on, Alex.
Present.
All right,
there you
perfect.
go, Alex.
Good. We saw you. We knew you were here. All right, so we've got the February 2025 meeting minutes. Any questions or concerns on those? All right, any of the council members want to make a motion to accept the February 2025 meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion for that to accept
Okay,
the
thank you, Sandy.
2025
Do we have a
meeting.
second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Becky. All right, so motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes from February 2025. Roll call vote, please, Mary?
Christine Joy.
Accept.
Sandra Wright.
Accept.
Becky Coletta.
Accept.
Alex Haggerty.
Accept.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, all right, on to the February 2025 financials. Brenda, did you want to take these over?
You're on mute,
You're
Brenda.
muted, Brenda.
Sorry about that. Take two. Okay, at the end of February, we had a positive financial standing showing a 1.8% budget surplus. Available surplus funds remaining were $99,971. Statement of expenditures report shows total expenses for the month at $220,189.62. Cash position report shows income for the month at $379,005.06. Disbursements for the month were $324,411.19. The total cash available at month's end was $2,017,800.04. The OPEB account had a gain of $21,465.25, bringing the ending balance in the OPEB account to $1,281,920.15. Budget resources report. Cash receipts being $379,500.05.06 brings the total year-to-date receipts to $4,981,720. AAA report. Outstanding balance for AAA pass-through programs was $507,175.37. Outstanding balance for AAA admin and ombudsman programs was $78,840,045, bringing the total outstanding balance for all AAA programs to $586,015.82. Volunteer transportation account, beginning balance was $161,926.79. Donations received were a total of $346.35, bringing the ending balance in the fund to $162,273.14. Balance at the ROM statement and activity. Balance at the beginning of the month was $166,143.60. Receipts were $5,850.
Finally, be able to wear your favorite outfits and feel amazing.
The receipts were $5,850, bringing the total receipts to $62,800. Expenses were $10,818.66, bringing the total expenses to $67,772.34. The ending statement balance was $161,376.81. Budget reports. The spend to date percentage rate at the end of the month was 64.91%. The ideal percentage in the 8th month of the fiscal year would be 66.72%. So at month's end, we had a 1.8% surplus. Available surplus funds remaining are a total of $99,971. Page 1, expenditures at the end of the month were a total of $2,002,140. Budgeted funds remaining at the end of the month were a total of $1,082,364. Page 2, projected grant income for this fiscal year is $3,066,916. That number is, I'm sorry, I'm reporting a number that's not there. I didn't change the number, I guess. I'm so sorry. It's $3,084,504. Page 3, projected grant income, projected pass-through income for this fiscal year remains at $1,996,327. Next is the list of combined accounts payable and cash transfers for the month, and I want to point out that the cash transfers of $170,000 is the transfer from the regular funds into the payroll account for the payroll for the month. And that's the end of the regular financial reports for February.
Great, thank you, Brenda. Any questions for Brenda on the financials? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the February 2025 financials as presented?
I'll make a motion on that.
Thank you, Sandy. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alex. So motion is second. Roll call vote, please, Mary?
Christine Joy,
Accept.
Sandra Wright,
Accept.
Becky Coletta,
Except.
and Alex Hegarty.
I'll accept.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. All right, so now on to the update on state and federal actions. Mary, did you want to take the lead on that one?
Yep, I will. I'm just making sure I'm not muted here. You know, and this is something that we're just going to continue to be monitoring as we go along the way. It was funny because one of the board members who usually makes the finance meeting wasn't able to be here, and the question came back saying, you know, so there have been no funds withheld, and the answer is no. We're continuing to process our invoices and with current contracts. It sounds like the discretionary funds are the ones that seem to be most on hold, if you will, or under review. But Brenda has done a nice job. What we did for the last couple of months, and we'll continue to do, is do a one-pager about where we are with our free cash. And I think maybe, Brenda, thank you. We can just quickly go over this. This one-pager will continue to be in the same format. You know, what our monthly payroll is, you know, what the indirect AP, you know, and you'll see in the parentheses how much of, you know, the monthly is of ROM, what the total is. We also will provide what we have in each of our accounts. There's some that we can touch and some that we can't. And then if we can just scroll down, some of those accounts have funds in it that we get in a lump sum. And again, we went through this before, but it's helpful just to go through as we go through a little bit of these uncharted times. And then the adjusted total funds available, what we have. So again, you know, the last portion that we'll always do is talk about the ROM, the current balance. I will, just because we really didn't touch upon it under finance, but we are still continuing to be actively seeking out someone to rent out our back space. We were getting $2,500 a month for rent. And so this is January, February, March that we have not received any income. Again, we're trying all different avenues, but running the organization and a few other things, it becomes a little bit of challenge. So we'll continue to be active in pursuing funding for a rental for the backspace. But that's, Brenda, I don't know if you wanted just to add anything to that.
No, I don't. These numbers are as of the 20th of March, so it's very current. And I will update it every month right before the meeting, so we can see what our active available funds are at that moment. And that's really all. Mary did a great job. Thank you, Mary.
There's no action that's taken at this. This is just more for board members review, and it will always be in the package, as Brenda said.
Great, thank you, Mary. All right, so next item is the fiscal policy annual review. And
Yes.
this is an action item for us. So we're going to go over the modifications that we're proposing to the document and ask this committee to accept these changes, or if you've got suggestions on items that you would prefer a different change, we can certainly entertain those, and then we'll bring this to the full council for their final approval.
And Madam Treasurer, if I could, just, it may be helpful just to run through this. Again, these are amendments that, first of all, you took the time, which was great. The staff took a couple meetings internally for us to have multiple conversations about this. And on an annual basis, these fiscal policies will be addressed just to tighten things up along the way, the checks and balances. So again, these are just the amendments, and following this will be in your packet when it was sent out. These were included, but also included was the full fiscal policies. But so we are making some changes throughout the document, and I don't think we got to everything for today's meeting, but we're changing fiscal officer to fiscal manager. We had title changes last year, and Brenda now is a fiscal manager. So that will be, so if we missed one, we will get to that. And then we're updating where the secretary / clerk is now, by our bylaws change, is to be referred to as vice president. And that was adopted by the council. So that was just a general start up the beginning. And then as Megan had highlighted, the red shows the update. So on page 3, again, we're going to go from what was currently there to the purpose of the OCPC financial management policy is to establish guidelines for the Old Colony and the Old Colony Regional Operations Management, as well as staff. Part of that is really because we are only addressing Old Colony Planning Council, but we need to really address both the OCPC and the OCPC ROM at the same time. By doing that change that addresses that, there are footnotes that talks about what each of those and how they're interacted. And then just some, striking out impactful, and then adding this policy will be reviewed annually, preferably at the first finance meeting during the calendar year for updates and revisions. So while we are sitting in March, our goal will be to try to have it sometime in January. So then the rest of the months are following through. So that is, I don't know if anybody has any questions about that piece. If not, I'm going to move on to the goals, which is page 3 of the financial policies. Megan, if you can just move, thank you. The content is the same, just formatting with bullets. Christine had offered that to us. Sometimes you put things in a nice paragraph, but it doesn't pull out. And by bulleting these items, it just pulls out specifically the goals of the financial policy. Any questions about that? Number 4. Change title. So one of the things that what we've found throughout the audit process, they were asking questions about what are the internal controls, but also what's the fraud preventions. When we were talking about internally, the internal controls really are the fraud prevention. And we'll read through this a little bit, but as you will see is that, it's important for us to have all checks and balances. And again, in the spirit of transparency. So by using the word fraud prevention with internal controls, so if in fact a board member is asked, you can at least know that there are these processes in place. So Old Colony Planning Council utilizes all reasonable internal controls, including proper segregation of duties to monitor and control the use of OCPC assets to reduce the potential for financial fraud. Financial reports are presented in detail during monthly board meetings, which are approved and voted on. And then there are some slight edits, as you will see, just highlighted in red. Any questions about that?
No,
Thank you.
all sounds good.
So fiscal year and accounting, again, these are just in bulleted form. So really no major change other than bullets. Under number 6, executive director and fiscal manager, you'll see that part was changed. And then there are some slight changes just to highlight procedures that are associated and are really managed by the council. So you, the council, are the fiscal fiduciary responsible party. Our job as staff is to make sure that you have all the information that's needed. So the managed by the council was much more appropriate, not associated. You are the managers of it. And then there was just a slight change in crossing off better, better understand. So to all parties to understand. I'm just going to move on to number 7. Just slight edits. Again, the management terminology was much more appropriate for not only the finance committee, but also for the council. And then the budgeting, financial reporting, it's going from, it is the policy of the Old Colony Planning Council to adopt annually a budget. I'm going to go just to the 2. And again, it's a little bit of semantics, but it's a stronger language. Each year, Old Colony Planning Council will adopt an annual budget for the following fiscal year from July 1st through June 30th. Again, slightly different, but we all felt this was a stronger language, and there was a little bit some interpretation from the what it used to be. Moving on, pass-through funds. So I think we're just adding pass-through funds will consist of, that was more just to clean that language up. Conformance to the budget, we're going from, sorry, I think, oh, right, thank you, Megan. We're going to go just to the 2. All expenditures are to be reviewed and approved by the executive director and reported to the Finance Audit Committee for approval with final approval by the council. It's what we do. It's just a little bit cleaner terminology. So that's what we have. Then we'll go on to, excuse me, we were going to look for some input for the community and from the committee. Previous today, Becky and Christine, Charlie, Brenda, and I met, and some language we actually came up with because we were like, we need some help on this, and they provided some guidance. So I want to make sure we captured this correctly, Becky and Christine from early. But if an unexpected expenditure arises that has not been provided for in the budget, the fiscal manager will confirm that the money for such expenditure is available from additional sources of income or by transfer. There was some language in here where we're striking all of that out. If the amount is over the limit of the threshold of the bylaw, permits the executive director, then the need will be presented to the Finance Audit Committee and Council.
I think
So-
that language needs a little bit of correction. It's if the amount is over the limit of the threshold permitted, that the bylaws permit to be approved by the executive director.
Okay. Thank you, Becky. As you know, I tried to capture
I
this.
know. It
But
was,
that's helpful. The idea is, in essence, thank you, because I think you had offered it. It sounded so much smoother when you said it earlier today. Basically, as you can see in the footnote, the current bylaws authorize the executive director to purchase, to authorize the purchase of equipment and services. Actually, I can make purchases $10,000 and less. I cannot go, I need to go for further approval if it's in excess of $10,000. So, at one point we were kind of talking about what does necessary mean, and before, but the idea was to get some checks and balances here, to include both internal and external. So I think the idea again was if there is a not expected, as it said, expenditure, I need to come before the council and communicate not only just with the treasurer, but the finance committee. And if it's like an emergency, you'll see in number 11, if it's an emergency, we will call a meeting if necessary. But the goal that we try to do is to not, as Charlie said in the earlier meeting, if there's something that happens with this building, that's what the ROM budget's for. It doesn't really affect the OCPC budget. And it was hard for us to come up with like, well, what do we mean by unexpected? And that's a whole clue, right? If it's unexpected and we did not budget it for something, if it's in excess of 10,000, I need to come to you. I'd come to you anyway, and I report out that this is happening. But again, this in a fiscal policy, it now gives the framing of it.
Mary,
Yes.
I have a question. In that last statement, and Becky can probably correct me if I'm wrong. What if we put in there that, the amount would be up to $10,000, and then you'd have to go to the executive director? Because I think that you have some things in here that
You mean then
says,
you'd have to go to the council?
yeah, the council,
Yes,
yes,
yes.
excuse me. So I would just say that we give the executive director the okay up to $10,000, and then would have to go before the executive director, but to the council.
So let me clarify, I currently have that authorization under the bylaws up to 10,000. What we're talking about is if it's unexpected over that 10,000, if I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah, I
So-
think the only reason we were referring to the bylaws instead of the 10,000 was because if the bylaws change the 10,000 to be less or more, then this would automatically track the bylaws.
Right.
Okay, so we're not like doing it double.
Right.
No. Okay.
Thank you, Sandy. It is tricky, right? I mean, our goal is.
Yeah, it
really-
is. It just
Well-
sounds like we're double talking here, but I understand what you're saying.
And I'm glad we're taking the time to do that, because the idea is for again, checks and balances, and we're a mean and lean and efficient organization, but having us all be on the same page as we move forward. So I think any other comments or questions about this?
Mary, I would just suggest that we add for approval at the end of that, presented to the
Right.
Finance Audit Committee and Council for approval, or
Thank
something
you.
like that.
Right, that is missing, you're right. Then the need will be presented Finance Committee and Council for approval. Do you see where that is, Megan? Yeah.
Yep, I
Okay.
just made that note. And then I'm also, I think so that it also makes more sense with the footnote is I'm gonna like put the preface of like to authorize purchase. So I'll just kind of say the executive director has the right to authorize, or whatever the statement is above in the bullets.
Yep.
I'll make sure that that's listed in there, and I'll source what page it's on or something like that, just so then that way it makes
That
more
would be-
sense.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, number 11, emergency meetings. Thank you for that discussion. I think it's helpful. And Becky, I mean, really solidifying what you said earlier today. The emergency meetings on page 8, it's just updating the verbiage. I'm not going to read it. It really just clarifies. So the idea is if we're going to call an emergency meeting, but it has to be within 10 business days, but then we also have a council meeting coming. So if you can see at the end, we say at the next regular scheduled council meeting, unless the Finance Committee, Executive Director, and President determined to be an emergency, will require the final documents. As it is, we know you're all busy and we don't want to overburden you, but just like we called that emergency meeting when executive orders were processed, we didn't know quite where we're going. But that information and that discussion was helpful. So the idea is not to add more meetings. This is going to be streamlining so we can have it one after another. Thank you. Accounts payable, update with slight edits.
Mary, real quick, Noreen, just let me know she is on the phone. She has joined us now.
Okay.
She's just in the attendees portion,
Thank you, Noreen.
just for the record.
Updates with slight payments will be by check, right, drawn, checks drawn upon this, we signed by 2. So it's not necessarily any members of the council, really our officers. And I always try, I'm always a third signer. I have the approval to be a third signer, but I don't sign unless Christine or Becky are on vacation or something, right? And then, but it really should be officers who are doing the signing. And then next is the NICRA. We probably should spell out what NICRA means on here just for purposes of a,
Mhm.
not everybody may know, that's who sets our overhead rate.
Mary,
we
it
have-
might actually be spelled out in the rest of it, but I made a note
Okay.
to make sure. So
Thanks, Megan. So it's just updated because it's within the U.S. Department of Interior. So thank you, Charlie, for catching that one. And then I know Sean came up with this language with but some tweaks from Charlie, but having to do with the OPEB fund. So it just goes through some of the new processes, right? We have new OPEB and just with how things have all been moving a little bit fast for us. So withdrawals from the OPEB account will require the approval of the OPEB Trust Committee and will be enacted by the council treasurer after consultation with the executive director. The signature of the council treasurer will be required for any withdrawal from the account and may be initiated by the approved fiscal office staff and at his or her direction. Withdrawals from the fund are to be used only to reimburse OCPC for costs associated with maintaining the benefits for OCPC retirees. If these payments become too cumbersome to maintain as a normal operating cost, period. Historically, OCPC has not made withdrawals from the OPEB account because the goal is to fund the OPEB account 100% before making such withdrawals. Thank you, Sean and Charlie, for going that. So, and what Megan did in the packet is the fiscal policies as they were being amended, but these are the amendments. And Madam Treasurer, I was hoping that unless there's some questions that we would take them maybe collectively for approval.
All right, any of the council members have any questions or concerns or suggestions on changes that they would like on the updates to the financial policies that we just went over? All right, see no hands and hear no voices. Do we have a motion to accept these amendments to the financial policies? And we will bring the suggested amendments to the full council for their approval tomorrow night.
I'll make that motion.
Thank
I'll
you, Alex.
second
Do we
it.
have a second? Thank you, Sandy. All right, so motion and a second to accept the fiscal policy updates. Mary, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes, Christine Joy,
Accept.
Sandra Wright,
Except,
Becky Coletta,
Except,
Alex Hegarty,
Accept.
and Noreen O'Toole. I'm gonna just, she's able to talk. I'm not sure. I know she's on there. Anyway.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, everyone. It's
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Thanks,
Thank you,
Noreen.
Noreen.
I think, okay, am I unmuted? Yes?
You are.
All
Okay,
right.
great. Okay.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Noreen.
All right, so let's move on to the FY26 budget preparation. Mary and Brenda, did you want to take this one?
I will start first and then hand it over to Brenda. So at the request of Sandra and the other members, we were asked to do a projection. Brenda has done a great job at this. So again, prior budget, current, the projected for 26 and then 27. So Brenda, I'm going to let you take away with this.
Okay. I projected the budget as best I could out into the 2 years using the expense numbers and increasing or decreasing based on what projected looks like it's going to be. So these are truly projected numbers. You'll see at the bottom, the totals for the expenses. They decrease a little bit over the next couple of years because with everything that's going on with the federal funding situation, I decreased a few things that aren't necessarily necessary. So that said, moving ahead to the income page, Megan. So the income you will see is going to be the income is going to be less than the expenses on those projected years because we do not know. Many of our grants are just yearly grants or fiscal year grants that we do historically get every single year. But we don't know what those things will be until the years happen. So I have just budgeted the income for those grants that we know go over the course of 2, 3, 4 years and things that we assume we will continue to get, but these numbers can most definitely change. So, for right now, the two years that for FY 26 and FY 27 look like they might, be coming in a little bit upside down, but those numbers will change. So, that's really about all I have to say about that. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I will update this as things become more clear.
Can I just weigh in, Sandy, was that helpful to you in terms of, because I know I think we were looking, maybe at one point you were looking at 5 years, but as to what Brenda was talking about, we looked back 1 year, we're in our current year, and we're looking at, potentially 2 other years. It still is an unknown, but it's helpful just to kind of see some of these numbers as we go along the way.
Yeah, I
And-
think, I think we need to know the projections and, you can't always, go right to the exact figure, but just to have some idea. And obviously, we've hit some struggles this year with the, some of the cutbacks from the federal government. But it's always good to have, a 5-year look at, where we're going to be. And, I know Brenda does a great job and, she's been on top of a lot of it. But sometimes, when things like this comes up, it concerns me, where we're
Yeah.
at and what we can look at and, where we're shot and, what the future would look like.
And I think we all felt both internally, and I know some of the other board members felt the same. This is a good exercise for us to go through. I will say, in fact, we just heard today that we may be getting another grant, right? So we're continually to work with our communities on all levels, and whether it's private funding, right? As I mentioned, we utilized our 501c3 to apply for grants that we couldn't apply for as a governmental entity. We're also looking internally and just making sure, like, cutting back where we can, and we're looking at very de minimis, increases for personnel, and just really keeping it tight until we get a better sense of what the future is, and efficient, effective, continuing to meet the needs where we can. And I could not be more proud of this staff, and that means everybody from Brenda and Sean and Megan, but also I'm thinking about what Dawn. I just left a meeting earlier today. Dawn and Nick and Paul and myself were working on a tech hub that could mean 100,000, and working with our communities. And Dawn's working with Easton on a sewer, and then Charlie and his team in terms of exploring funding with trails, and like, it's just not walking and continuing on as business as usual. They're not, they're turning over every stone possible. And, from a management and perspective, we do work really hard, and I just want to make sure that we don't burn our staff out. That part's really important to me, but at the same time, they know everything they do will have an impact on our community. So, we work legislatively to get earmarks and, whatever it takes. And so Brenda doesn't really have some of that information, because I know Senator Brady's office has been really helpful to us in finding some earmarks. And, as I think earlier today, Becky had asked, there was the $1.9 million in discretionary funding for the PPPP, but it's still in review. So we haven't given up hope. It's not a no, it's not a yes. And if those funds come through, while it will have an end product of efficiency on the MPO, OCPC MPO process, but it will also mean some revenue for staffing and for other things. So it's a puzzle. And I will have for the next meeting, Paul Omano, as again, I've talked about it at many times, he's been working with Brenda, and has this grant tracking system that is an incredible system. It knows when one grant ends, one grant begins, and how do we balance it all. That in itself is nothing shy of a miracle, because there's just a lot of funding, and keeping people employed and keeping things active. So that's it in a nutshell, but I figured that's like an addendum to the projections we're talking about.
Thank you, Mary. All right. think we're on to the next item. So this is actually a really good segue into an other business item. And this was a MARPA request from the RPAs regarding funding. And this came in after the agenda had already been closed. So Mary, did you want to give an update?
I do.
Talk
I
about
do.
it a little bit?
I do, Megan, can you go to that section of the agenda? Because I'm going to run through it. So the Mass Association of Regional Planning Agencies, MARPA, there were 13 of us and we meet on a monthly basis. So prior to the last meeting, there was an email that went out and said, here's some questions. How are you addressing this? So Glenn Eaton from the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission had answered and put it nicely in a document. And what we're going to be doing at OCPC, we're going to be adapting it to us. But we're going to use his just to kind of, again, this is in your packet. But, you know, how is your agency structuring contingency planning? How are you modeling multiple funding cut scenarios, whether it's 5% or 10%? So he goes on to explain this. You know, the questions, again, they're really good, solid questions that we should be adding. And before any kind of thing goes before the public, I want to be able to talk to staff so they're not hearing about what we're talking about contingency plans at a public meeting. I want to be able to talk to them about what we're doing internally and making sure. So use of reserves, are you considering tapping into agencies' reserves? And that goes back to the one pager that Brenda pulled together, what we have available for funding, right? We had at the top what our monthly payroll is, and we can probably get 5 months if we were to become, you know, funding we're supposed to be totally shut down. Again, we're like at just shy of 70% of federal funds, and the rest of it comes from state. So we talked a little bit about the going into reserves, and I'm not going to go into the details what he has there, but the next question they ask is staffing impacts. You know, how are evaluating the potential impact on staffing? Are you implementing hiring freezes? We have not done that yet. We have, as you saw in my email, Elise Prince, her last day was last Friday. At this point, before I have Megan start crying, because we're all crying, but it means without hiring and having someone to replace Elise, there's a number of things that were on her plate that now tend to be on Megan's plate. And so Megan and I are having several conversations about what can come off of her plate and what other staff can be taking on. So we haven't talked about freezes yet. We haven't. We have employees, and as far as we know, for projecting of where our funds and whether it's EDA or the state or Mass DOT, we seem to be continuing to be on track. You know, talks about reassigning roles, and I'm not really going to get in detail of that because this is again for MRPC, and I really want to be able to take the time to delve into this. Revenue diversification, already talked to you about utilizing the 501c3, and staff is pretty innovative in applying for funds. Lots of co-applying, whether it's transportation and economic development, or whether it's comprehensive planning and transportation. There is a lot of good discussions. One of the things that Glenn mentioned in here, and it's, you know, we're working with your communities to help them apply for one-stop planning grants so then they can hire us. Now, it sounds a little bit incestuous, but we're allowed to do that. We basically serve as a consultant. So rather than hiring a private consultant, we know our communities. We have the context already. We know the town managers. We know the board of selectmen. We know the planning office. We really are in the best shape to be able to work with the communities. And until recently, we never really had someone working on housing as their job, and that's Jason DeRose. And you know, he received, I think it was a $20,000 grant from Mass Housing Partnership to work with the town of East Bridgewater on their MBTA community. He's got the skill set. We're Switzerland. So the funds that we get, we're dealing with the data and the information we have. It's not hiring us so we can go either way. It's here's the data and here's the information. So I did want to highlight that community one-stop planning grants and other grants that we can receive funding for in terms of diversification. And what's next after this, Megan? 6, communication and transparency. Again, you know, a perfect example was the legislative breakfast that that was held. It really was great to have the legislators hear the work that we do, highlighting the water study and the elder care, right? No one really knows how deep in the work that we do. So our role really is to make sure we stay engaged with our legislators, both state, local, board of selectmen, town managers, whatever it is. And we utilize that newsletter for communicating. I think we're the one of only 2 regional planning agencies that put out twice a month newsletter. That way we're always, that communication is important, because if we're leaving it for someone else to tell our story, then we're not doing our job. So we're telling our own story with you as a council and the staff to make sure that we're meeting the needs. If we can keep scrolling down, Megan. And that's it. Is that it? Yeah, okay. So that's what Montechusett did. Our goal will be, you know, Brenda started something, Charlie, Brenda and I, and Sean probably need to spend a little bit more time. And again, first, I want to be able to make sure that the employees, again, I'm not asking them necessarily for their permission, but I think it's important we have a good relationship, and they're part of the solution of how we keep ourselves afloat. And I'd like to make sure that they're informed about what we're looking. Again, I'm not looking for any kind of hiring freeze at this point. I haven't had any indication from the federal government at this point. And, you know, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, that was really helpful. So, well, that is something that we'll see more of maybe at a future meeting, but it's just not ready for prime time today. So we have gone through everything on our agenda. So I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? All right,
Second.
you're all shaking your heads.
Yeah.
All right, second, Sandy. All right, all in favor, raise a hand.
Aye.
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 Yes? All right,
Thanks.
good night,
Bye.
everybody.
And
We'll see you
everybody.
Sounds good.
with the
Good night,
right name.
everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
All right,
you.
6 p.m. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.